Good morning. Hope everybody's doing good this morning. We'll go ahead and get our Sunday school hour started here. And I've come to the conclusion of something this morning that I need reading glasses. Because I'm struggling. I've been trying to hold off as long as I could, but I think I've lost that battle. I'm good. I think I can make it through today. Yeah, it'll probably throw me off. I'm already nervous up here. So. All right, I appreciate that. All right, let's go to prayer this morning. We'll take some prayer requests. We'll start over here this morning on this side.
Remember Israel in prayer. Remember all those that are traveling in prayer. Pray that the Lord of the harvest will send forth labor. Remember Dawn and Denzel and her family in prayer. And remember Aaron in prayer. And remember all the sick and the shut in and all those that are in prisons and stuff. And remember Russia and Ukraine and them in prayer. The situation over there in the Middle East.
All right. A lot on your plate there, yeah. Remember that, yep. Ryan?
Remember me and my family. Remember Debbie and Jeannie and Amy this morning, they're traveling. And remember my son Kenny.
Okay. Okay.
John, I had a couple unspoken requests for a couple of young people. Also, one of my neighbors I want to pray for. Also, I have some needs also the Lord knows all about physical situations. And I'm thinking that I'm here this morning that there have been nasty shingles. Makes about the third time in the last 2 years I've had it, and this one was worse. But I thank God he's been good to me. Also remember Selena and Madison.
Scott's not feeling well this morning.
Sure.
Remember Ellen while she's down in camp. She's by herself, but she's doing fine, so just keep reading your prayers.
Anyone else on this side? Okay, how about over here?
Remember our sister-in-law Carol Oakes and her friend Annie Redden, and then also have Chester Farley. He's battling cancer, very bad. And keep our family in prayers. And Linda and I'll be traveling next week with her for some traveling nurses.
Remember me and my family, my grandson's traveling, my daughter and her family's traveling next week. And remember Marlon
Any others?
I feel led to ask for prayer for the lost church.
Like y'all, if you would, just to remember my family, my dad, Corey and Allison will be traveling today, and just remember them if you would. How about unspoken requests? Anybody with those? All right, let's all stand if you would, and I'm going to ask Matt, would you lead us in prayer this morning?
Heavenly Father,
Thank you. Amen. All right. So, getting started this morning, a very good lesson this morning that we're going to be looking into. Is very relevant of today's time. We see a lot of the things that were happening in here that we see a lot of that today going on in our country and in the world. But to start off, maybe we can go back to last week and kind of get a refresher of what was taught last week in regards to Absalom taking situations into his own hands with, I believe it was Amnon and Tamar. We know that he devised a plan and murdered his half-brother and then fled after that was done. And we know that it was a devastating blow for the family, David. I'm sure he had some remorse, some sorrow that was going on there that he had to deal with there. And that's leading up to this part of Scripture here that we're going to be going over this morning. Now, like I was saying, this lesson here today is kind of relevant today, and I want to kind of give you a background of the characteristics of the people in this story. And the first one I want to bring up is Absalom. I want to kind of give you a little bit of his background, but Absalom, if we were to think of him in today's time, I kind of looked at him as I read into this and studied a little bit. He is a man, or if, say he had a YouTube channel, he would be an influencer, I guess you could say. And we all probably know those today that would fall into that category, maybe like, and I'm bad at this because I don't really follow him too much, but maybe like Paul Logan. Or is it Paul Logan? I don't know. This is a young person's reflective. But just different ones, that are into social media that get out there and project things. They want to be noticed. They want to be characterized as influencers, I guess, if you would. But this is the way I kind of look at Absalom. He's described as being a very handsome fella. In 2 Samuel 14:25, it says, "Now in all Israel there was no one who was praised as much as Absalom for good looks. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, there was no blemish in him." So we know that he was a very fair man, very probably strong jawline, maybe all the attributes of a very pragmatic person there. He had very long hair, I guess. He grew his hair every year, and as he got it cut yearly, I think it said, I don't remember how many shekels, but I kind of went back and did a little bit of the math. It was almost 5 pounds of hair. Can you imagine being that much hair on a man? It would be, after a haircut, he probably had a pile of hair that big, is all I can say. But we know he was a very cunning and crafty person, very driven. He loved the spotlight. I'm going to say that he was probably well-spoken, always had the right things to say, as we'll see here in this lesson. He was a good salesman, had a good showmanship. He presented himself well. And we'll find out, he traveled with an entourage to kind of build himself up, to make himself look a little more popular, if you would say. And then, as we look into David's character, his father, we see one attribute of his as he always trusted the Lord in every situation. He always trusted the Lord to do that. He dealt with a lot of adversity in his life. He had a lot of troubles. His life was sought after for a long time by King Saul. He was in great battles. He experienced betrayal. But he was more or less the crafty veteran, if you would say. He was now the king of Israel, and his leadership, we know a lot was going on, and it's keeping David's, as I gather from what I'd studied here, it's keeping David very busy. And then he's got this turmoil going on with his family. So David's got a lot going on right now. And we'll see that as we read here. But I just want to point out, in these characteristics, what do we see in the Bible when these people trust in the Lord and obey his commandments? What do we see usually happen when they do that?
Deliverance from the enemy.
Deliverance. What else do we see?
Periods of prosperity and peace.
Prosperity and peace.
Lessons.
A lot of life lessons, yes. But in about every situation that you'll see in the Bible, those that are true to God, those that keep his commandments, the outcome of their situations is always favorable. Would you not agree? He does discipline. Speaking of God, he does discipline when we're out of line. But if we are repentant, he'll bring us back to where we need to be, get us on the right path. God is always doing that. And we see that, we'll see that in this lesson, that David always trusted the Lord in everything that he did. Now, going back to the situation of Amnon and Tamar, we know that David failed in his discipline of that situation. He kind of maybe overlooked it. We don't really know. It doesn't tell a whole lot about his thinking at the time, but we know that he didn't really address the situation. So that may have led up to a few things, maybe put a little hard-heartedness in Absalom at the time. But again, we know that Absalom took matters into his own hands, and we have a tendency to think, well, he got what he deserved, but that's not for us to do. That's not our judgment. That's up to the Lord ultimately. And then again, when Absalom murdered Amnon, we know that David again, Absalom fled, but David didn't pursue, or he didn't address that punishment as well. And the old saying, 2 wrongs doesn't make a right. As a human being, we're always going to make mistakes. But I don't know if any of you all can relate to this, but when we fail to discipline, maybe let's just use our children as an example. Maybe they do something wrong and we have a tendency to overlook that. Maybe once or twice you don't really do a whole lot, but if we continue to do that, that's going to cause some problems. You know, why is that? Why do you think that would cause problems if we were to overlook maybe our children's disobedience? They'll continue to do that. It'll get worse and worse. It will, snowball effect, I guess, if you would say. We got to deal with situations how the Lord leads us to do that. I mean, with no discipline, can you imagine this world? It would be totally unlivable, in my opinion. But let's get back into what we were talking about here. In Absalom, he has fled after the situation with Amnon, and he's in, I'm going to mess up a bunch of pronunciations this morning, so just bear with me. You'll know what I mean as we read. But Gershur is the place where he fled to, and this is where he's been spending most of his time, I would assume. But he's there for about 2 years, and he's desiring to come back to Israel. And we know that David is also in remorse here, and Joab, one of his captains that are really close to him, devises a plan. I'm not sure. Did you cover this last week about Joab? Okay. I didn't catch that part, but you all kind of get the idea. Joab's trying to make amends between the two to bring them back together. So in this, Absalom goes back and he requests to see the king. Well, David, for whatever reason, maybe hard-heartedness, decides he doesn't want to see Absalom at this time. So building a little fire in Absalom is what it's doing. So let's go ahead and read into our lesson this morning. We'll do it how we traditionally do. I'll read a verse. You guys follow after that, and we'll read these 10 verses here and go through them in sections. So let me start. And everybody have a book, by the way, or a lesson plan? Okay. All right, verse 1, it says, "And it came to pass after this that Absalom prepared him chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him. And Absalom said unto him, See, thy matters are good and right, but there is no man deputied of the king to hear thee.
Absalom said, Forever, O thou were made judge in the land, and every man which hath any suit or cause might come unto me, and I will do him justice.
And it was so that when any man came nigh to him to do him obeisance, he put forth his hand and took him and kissed him.
And on this manner did Absalom to all Israel that came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel.
But Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, As soon as ye hear the sound of the trumpet, then ye shall say, Absalom reigneth in Hebron.
And Absalom went 200 men out of Jerusalem that were called, and they went in their secrecy, and they knew not anything.
And Absalom sent for Ahithophel the Gileonite, David's counselor, from the city, even from Gilgal, while he offered sacrifices, and the conspiracy was strong, for the people increased continually with Absalom.
And there came a messenger to David, saying, The hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom.
Okay. So, in this little bit of reading we done there, we see the plan of Absalom starting to come together. And he is, like we had mentioned here earlier, he's a very crafty, driven, cunning person who is setting up. He's seen his shot and he's getting ready to take it, is more or less what I'm reading here. Now, as far as Absalom goes, in the first 6 verses here, which we've just read, and I'm just going to go over a couple of these. Just verse 3 I want to highlight a little bit. It said, "And Absalom said unto him, See, the matters are good and right, but there is no man deputied of the king to hear thee." Now, Absalom, in his plan, decided to, we see that he got up early in the morning. He'd go out to the gate. And this is where everybody would come to bring their disputes with others. This is where all the traffic came in and out of the city. So Absalom's presence there kind of meant that he was stepping in for the king, I guess you could say. He would greet these people coming in. Maybe if they had a dispute, he would act as judge. He would kind of throw in little subtle innuendos, I guess, to say, if I were king, I would have somebody here to handle these matters. Or he may say, your complaint is right, and I think you would probably need justice served, but if I were here, I would make sure that happens. I guess more or less is what he's saying. And the people were falling for it. They had, Absalom had an egotistical attitude towards this, and the people were, like I said, he had a salesmanship about him that really favored the people, and they grew fond of him. Yeah, politician, very, very true, very true. And it reminds me a lot of that. That's what I thought a lot of when we were reading through this. But at the same time, Absalom showing a total disrespect towards the king by doing this. He was putting himself in a place where he shouldn't have been, kind of putting himself above his rank, filling the shoes of David where David should have been, or he was leading the nation of Israel in a different direction. But not only that, he was disrespecting God. And we look back before David was king, we know that he had a lot of opportunities to take his place. He was anointed when he was very young to be king, and he had many opportunities. I'm not going to say many, but he had several to go ahead and dispose of Saul. We know that one time that Saul had been sleeping in a cave, and David cut the hem of his garment off, and he could have easily killed him, but he didn't, for the very reason that it was God's anointed king, and David didn't want to overshadow that. He didn't want to step in front of God's time, or I guess you could say. But Absalom did have heirship to the king. He just kind of jumped the gun a little bit, I guess you could say. He did it all for the wrong reasons. But we know that David acted wisely, to acknowledge what God had set in place. Now, moving on to verses. Now, see, there's a lot of things skipped in this. There's some missing pieces in your text here. But in verses 7 through 9, I want to read these to you guys. Luke, turn the AC down. It's getting hot up here. We got a fan. Can we turn the fan on? Is it back here? Which one of these switches is it?
That spotlight gets hot.
I guess. Okay. All right, so in verses 7 through 8, I want to read these to you real quick. It says, "And it came to pass after 40 years that Absalom said unto the king, I pray thee, let me go and pay vow, which I have vowed unto the Lord in Hebron. For thy servant vowed a vow while I abode in Geshur in Syria, saying, If the Lord shall bring me indeed to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord. And the king said unto him, Go in peace. So he arose and went to Hebron."
Your vent was closed.
What? Somebody set me up here. So we see Absalom lying to a trusting father here. We can only imagine that we see that Absalom sends word to the king. He's like, let me go and worship, because he made a vow while he was exiled in Geshur there. And he wanted to go and bring again a deed. Let's see, he wanted to, pay my vow. He wanted to pay his vow to the Lord. In other words, I guess he was portraying to David that he wanted to go worship. Now, as a father, that would probably make us very proud that a child would want to go and worship the Lord. It would be a good feeling to know that, hey, they're putting their trust in him. He's heading in the right direction. Let's absolutely go in peace. And, I think ultimately it was a lie to a trusting father who heard that. But the significance here in Hebron, this was the place where David was crowned king of Judah at the time. And also it was the birthplace of Absalom. We know that Bethlehem was nearby, and that was the place of David's birth. But Hebron had a lot of significance here. The people in that area knew the history there as David was crowned, and it played a big part in what Absalom's plan was going on here. Now, the 40 years mentioned in verse 7, there's a couple different opinions on that. They said it may have translated that the 40th year that David reigned, or it was translated maybe as 4 years, the length of time since Absalom returned from Geshur. But at the same time, David had to have a good feeling about this. He felt that Absalom was coming to his senses. He wanted to go and worship, and we know that Absalom had some alternative motives in that situation. So moving on to verses 10 through 12, let me read these again. And it says, while he's here in Hebron, Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as ye hear the sound of the trumpet, then ye shall say, Absalom reigneth in Hebron. And with Absalom went 200 men out of Jerusalem that were called, and they went into their simplicity, and they knew not anything. And Absalom sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor, from the city, even Gilo, while he offered sacrifices, and the conspiracy was strong. For the people increased continually with Absalom. So we see Absalom putting his plan in place, sends these spies out, has folks playing trumpets, or back in this time, this was a sound of something important going on. If they were to blow trumpets, people put an ear up. They wanted to hear what was going on. And Absalom gave him the words to say to let them know that Absalom is reigning in Hebron. So how we see a lot of confusion going on here. Absalom has got a lot of things going on, trying to deceive people. He's got a lot of smoke and mirrors going on. He's got 200 diplomats with him at the time, and people see this and they're like, what's going on? Absalom's the new king here. We hear all these trumpets going and praises going for him, and we see all these dignitaries with him, and all these things going on. It really left the people in a little bit of confusion. Now, us ourselves, when we're given information and the facts are unknown, we would assume that it's correct, right? We hear a lot of news, a lot of things on the news. You expect it to be true. How do we know that? Maybe we have to check the facts of those things. You see a lot of things on the internet, totally untrue, causing a lot of confusion, a lot of disorder. People, you hardly know what to believe unless you get in and find out the facts about things. See our president always raving about fake news. Well, there's truth to that. but we got to fact check him as well. I mean, we got to make sure what we're hearing all the time is the right. But here we see Absalom spreading this deception all the way through, and we see that this is definitely causing division. Do we see that today with different things going on? Division all through our country, and a lot of it is due to false truth and just made up things. I mean, it's getting out of hand these days. It's people are misinformed a lot. So must take it upon ourselves, I guess you could say, to really get down to the nitty-gritty and find out what's going on with the information that we hear. I would hope that through my brothers and sisters here that we could be truthful with one another, even if it does hurt. You know, I think that is a virtue that has kind of faded away a little bit in today's time. But I
John,
would-
one thing I noticed that you said, and I've seen it quite a bit, you used the word influencers earlier. I've noticed what a lot of them tend to do is when they start off, they're small, but then they start off with ear candy. They start off with things to make people have a trust in them. Stuff that's kind of neutral. It doesn't really offend anybody either way. And then they get a little bit more into it, and then they start getting a bigger following. And when you listen to someone long enough and loud enough, you start to believe what they say. And then before you know it, you believe everything they say. That's probably something similar to what's going on with
Yes,
Absalom.
yes. Yes, it is. You know, we think, where's David at when all this is going on? Where could he be, you know, not hearing about this? I guess they didn't have a network of communication like we do today, but still yet, somebody's going to get through and make it to David to let him know what's going on. But at this point, I don't believe he knows what's going on, and he's having a lot of things under the surface that's brewing up here. And could he be too busy at the time? He had a lot of things going on. Maybe his kingdom was pretty vast, and as a king, I guess you got to keep tabs on everything that's going on. And you know, it's hard to say where he would be, but this was definitely a shocking blow to David. So could this situation have been avoided? We wonder if the discipline had been put in place earlier, could it have gotten this bad so quickly? We don't know. But, okay, so let's go down to verses 13 through 18. Now, this is basically where David finds out what's going on. And we'll see here how David handles this situation. So in verses 13 through 18, I had a lot more text than you all did, but it says, "And there came a messenger to David, saying, The hearts of men of Israel are after Absalom. And David said unto all his servants that were with him at Jerusalem, Arise, and let us flee. For we shall not else escape from Absalom. Make speed to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly. And bring evil upon us, and smite the city with the edge of the sword. And the king's servants said unto the king, Behold, thy servants are ready to do whatsoever my lord the king shall appoint. And the king went forth, and all his household after him. And the king left 10 women, which were concubines, to keep the house. And the king went forth, and all the people after him, and tarried in a place that was afar off. And all the servants passed on beside him, and all the Cherethites, and all the Pelethites, and all the Gittites, 600 men, which came after him from Gath, passed on before the king." So we see that David's household is in a ruckus here. He's gathering all his family, those that are true to him. He's like getting them all together. We got to get out of here. Something's bad's gonna happen, and he was absolutely right. Now, how did he know that? Just by one messenger coming and telling him that? I think this happened a lot back in this time. You know, if a king was threatened by an heir to the throne, they didn't waste no time, I'd say, to take care of business, protect themselves, protect their kingship, their heirs and things like that. They wanted to make sure that they were protected out of the way and along with himself. So David wasted no time taking action there. And then we see treason that entered the ranks of David's household. His father-in-law, Bathsheba's, I think it was her grandfather. That might be some fake news. I have to read back into that. But no, he was a very, very beloved counselor to David. And when he changed sides with Absalom, that was a devastating blow to David. He really knew that was a bad situation there. He felt like, now, if someone very close to us betrayed us, that's a bad feeling. I don't know if you've ever had that happen in your life, but it is not a good situation. You feel left a little empty. It kind of makes you wonder, who can I trust? It'll leave you kind of just wondering in that area of your life maybe. But we know that one of David's most trusted counselors had traded sides. So, that left me with the question, would you know of a time when someone encouraged you? Well, let me back up here. It's mentioned here in these verses, the 600 men. Now, I didn't get to go back and look at the 600 men, but these are guys that were with David through thick and thin. This is during the time when Saul was trying to kill David, and this was David's truest, more or less his personal bodyguards, but this was his inner core of men that he abode with most of the time. And I can remember in a story where all these guys were together in the wilderness, and David was mourning for a drink of water in a certain well in Israel. He was just reminiscing on some times back when he would take a cool drink out of this well, and it was occupied, I believe, by the Philistines. Again, I may be lying to you, but it was worth checking into. But David desired water from this well. He couldn't get to it. It was occupied by the enemy at the time. So these 600 men, maybe a handful of them, went and got him a drink out of this well, snuck into the enemy's camp, risked their lives to bring back some water for David. Now, David poured it out. He didn't even drink it because he didn't think it was worthy. But for them to do that for him meant that they had a whole lot of respect for him. They were true to him. They would probably die. Well, we know that they would die for him. And that is the kind of people you would want to be around you. And we'll see a little further along that he had a lot of close ones. The priests stayed with him, all the certain scribes, all his closest counselors, other than the one mentioned here that traded sides. But he had a lot of close people with him. And that kind of is a lesson for us. We always want people around us for encouragement, people we can trust. Maybe you can think of a time when you were encouraged by a friend, a close friend, someone true to you, maybe a family member. But even a close friend, I think of a lot of people in our family that were encouragers to me. And even in this church, I thought about one person in particular, is Rusty Richardson. He's a good friend, and I won't go into details why, but he is a true, sincere man. I will say that about him. He has a special place in my heart. Most of the time, yeah. But I know if I were in trouble and needed something, I could call on him to take care of or help me in that situation. And different ones in my family, aunts and uncles. My Aunt Sherry back there, I love her. She's always been there for me. I had some aunts. I can remember back when my dad had his first round of cancer. He was in his 50s, and my aunt had came came from here up to Ohio to visit to help, get the process started for his treatment. And I can remember her sitting me down next to me. This is Mildred Lilly, is her name. And she's a nurse, and she knew what was going to happen, what was going on. But she told me the truth. She says, John, your dad might have 10 to 12 good years. 10 to 12 good years, and then just make the best of what you got. But little did she know he'd live on beyond her. He's very unrealistic. My dad probably should have been dead 25 years ago. But I'll never forget my aunt doing that for me. And I respected her for that. And then when Corey and I first moved down here, we went to a family reunion. And my Aunt Naoma brought us into the garage, Corey and I, sat us down on the floor, and all the family come around and started to sing For He's a Jolly Good Fellow. Now, where that came from, I don't know. But I felt the love of the family welcoming us to West Virginia. It was a special moment, but we always need, thank you, sir. I'll bring it back to you. But yeah, we definitely want people to encourage us in our lives. We need trusted friends and family. And David was surrounded by that. Can anybody think of maybe someone in your life that would be that person?
I think my buddy Ron Hicks, he passed away, but he was that guy. And to add to what you were saying, it also matters when somebody doesn't co-sign with our ass. Somebody that shoots straight, which is probably one of the reasons why you respect the thorn in Marcia's side so much. Cut and dry and straight to the point, that makes a difference. Because it convicts us to a level where we know it's wrong, and what we're doing, it causes us to seek a better answer, or seek out the Lord in the situation. As a Christian, at least it does me.
Yes, we need those ones we can count on, those true people to be by our sides in those hard times. But let me continue here in verses. These aren't covered in your text, but I'm going to go on a little further in verses 24 through 29. This gives you a little background on what's going on here. It says, And lo, Zadok also and all the Levites were with him, bearing the ark of the covenant of God, and they set down the ark of God, and Abithiar went up until all the people had done passing out of the city. And the king said unto Zadok, Carry back the ark of God into the city, and if I shall find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me again, and show me both it and his habitation. But if he thus say, I have no delight in thee, behold, here am I, let him do to me as seemeth good unto him. Now this is our key verse here this morning, that we see David here is a true man of God. I believe David realized that he had fallen short on handling the situation of Amnon and Tamar and Absalom's injustices, and he was willing to repent and accept punishment for his sin. But we know that either way, he had trust in the Lord. They had the Ark of the Covenant. This was the ultimate representation of God being with you. And David says to the priest, turn around, take it back to the city. And if it be the Lord's will, he'll bring me back to it. But if not, give me what I got coming to me, basically, is what he's saying. That is something for David to really hang his hat on there. I see a lot of great things with that. If we trust the Lord, and Karen, was it last week she was here or the week before? 2 weeks ago. She was here and she made a statement that really been sticking with me. She's like, you never put a question mark And when we say why, this is what she said, when we say why to God, we put a question mark in front of God. And it's not for us to understand. God's ways are not our ways. But we cannot question him in anything that we do. If there's a situation in our life and we wonder, why is this happening to me? We have to trust the Lord.
Amen.
We have to trust the Lord that he'll bring us through. But I see kids lining up out there, but I'm going to try and just wrap up in verses 32 through 27. And this is the end of this text here, but it said, "And it came to pass when David was come to the top of the mount where he worshipped God, behold, Hushai the Archite came to meet with him with his coat rent and the earth upon his head. Unto whom David said, If thou passest on with me, then thou shalt be a burden unto me. But if thou return to the city, and say unto Absalom, I will be thy servant, O king, as I have been thy father's servant hitherto, so will I now also be thy servant. Then mayest thou for me defeat the counsel of Ahithophel. And hast thou not there with thee Zadok and Abiathar the priest? Therefore it shall be that what things soever thou shalt hear out of the king's house, thou shalt tell it to Zadok and Abiathar and the priests. Behold, they have there with them their two sons, Ahimaaz, Zadok's son, and Jonathan, Abiathar's son, and by them ye shall send unto me everything that you can hear. So Hushai, David's friend, came into the city, and Absalom came into Jerusalem." And that's where we'll stop in our text, but we see that another one of David's closest allies came to him. His garments rent and earth on his head. He was in mourning for the situation that was going on. But he came and David said, I need you to go back and infiltrate what's going on here. So David had a plan as well. He's the crafty veteran. And in this situation, he came to his senses. He started sending guys back, giving me information so I can make a plan. And I'll leave that for next week's lesson. But I just do want to go over a few things here. Here, as David worshiped God, God put the pieces in place. And this little insurrection that was going on was infiltrated by David's loyal subjects. That's evidence of God's sovereignty at work. There's a couple verses in here. You know, here's David's example. When we do not know where to turn, what do? Are we willing to submit to God's will and be committed to working towards its outcome? And will leaders, or do we just kind of take it upon ourselves and do what we think's right? It says, leaders won't always be right, but those who trust in God will always prosper. And there is two verses I want to read to you in Proverbs real quickly. This is Proverbs 21, verse 1. It says this, the king's heart in the hand of the Lord, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord like the rivers of water. He turns it wherever he wishes. And then in verse 16:9, it says, a man's heart plans his way, the Lord directs his steps. So thank you for your attention. I'm sorry I was all over the place, but appreciate you. Yes.
I remember back when my dad, before he ever became Christian, the one person he looked to was your grandfather, Ray. And then whenever he became a Christian, Ray was a big encourager for him.
Yes.
And